think that means you're with me, right?
Did you see that Ronnie yesterday when I said that? We're live. Did you hear her? She says, we're alive, Andy. Okay. We are on today's show. We've got Craig Goossen.
Craig Goossen.
Craig Goossen is, I would say, one of my oldest friends. Would that be what
kindergarten?
Kindergarten. So I've known Craig since I was in kindergarten. So he knows a lot of backstory that we probably aren't going to talk about today.
We're so going to talk about that today.
And we're going to talk about a life in boxing on
A Wonderful Chaos.
Sweet. So this is cool. This is one of these cool shows. You once said to me, you said, Andy, are we going to go through like everyone in your life and like have family or like high school reunions over and over again? You know, like I'm just sitting there on the side thinking like, how am I supposed to chime in? I hope this isn't just one of those shows.
No, let it be one of those shows.
Okay. It's a high school reunion show. The thing that's cool and what I loved about doing this is that I genuinely like people to be online that don't want to be online. Like that gives me much greater joy than anyone that sort of has something to say.
And Craig is up for us at 8:30 in the morning right now.
Yeah, he's in the office. I can guarantee you he certainly would not be doing this if it wasn't me. Like that's for sure. He has no desire to be in any limelight. He does not need anything from society. He's never been one to say, give me the spotlight. That's not him. And yet I've his life and his family life and what he was born into is utterly fascinating. So you have to think I'm like a kid. You know, we go to this school, St. Francis de Sales, where it's a private school, but it's got a little bit of a weird thing going on. You know, the priest was a pedophile. You know, we had all that sort of background story as well. And then, so basically,
were you touched?
I kind of was touched,
oh.
but I kind of was touched in a way that I still didn't know he wanted more.
Okay.
So the FBI came to the house. You know, I had to get called. I got to talk to by the FBI. I think we talked about this once. They came to the door. My mom said, the FBI is coming to talk to you today.
No.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me
this.
Yeah,
the FBI came in. We sat down. And then we had this really weird kind of discussion around what was or wasn't happening at the time. And then we went into a circle, actually. I had to go sit in with 15 people. Craig was probably also there. Well, we shouldn't go too far into this while he's not there, but he's nodding his head because even if he was, he would never want to acknowledge us. But we all talked about what Father Warren did because that was his name. And that was just a weird thing. But what that turned me off on religion pretty hardcore because they sheltered him, they threw him off to Rome, and they didn't want anyone to say a word. So if you talked about him, they would kind of exorcise you from the church. That's how bad it was then, right? Which is why all that stuff happened. But I digress. Craig was in there. His family was so fascinating because I'd go to their house. You know, we were in high school. And there would always be some like movie star hanging out. Like always. You just walk in the door and you'd think,
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I don't know if he was ever there, but he probably was. I don't know. Craig's looking up as we speak. He's wondering maybe it was. But that's the kind of thing it was. There's always someone hanging out. And you'd walk in and you'd look over and you'd recognize them. Craig didn't care. So you'd walk into his room and say, Craig, do you know that guy is like, you know, isn't outside, you know? He's like, yeah, he's always here, you know? And so, and, you know, Mr. T was always there because they were representing Mr. T when he first came out. And so basically his dad, Dan Goossen, he basically was this bigger than life. And when I say bigger than life, like there's people when you say it, and he was kind of Lady Gaga bigger than life as far as I was concerned. Because whenever he came into a room, he was just like, talk about like a charisma, like beyond. And
like a showman, you mean?
He was the showman of showmen. And he died, I don't know how long, but very recently. And it ended up being really serendipitous because this is the weekend where he was supposed to be inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame. So because of COVID, that didn't happen. But in a weird way, it's beautiful because this man, he created a life. and I love celebrating people who kind of were way beyond their time. And you kind of often understand those people after they're gone, because while they're living, you kind of think, God, this guy's absurd. And then you think, wow, he was absurd, and that created what eventually happened. So I wanted to have Craig on, just have some fun, discuss living in that life, how it's been, how the ins and outs of boxing. Because I've seen a lot just by being around him, and it's been I learned a lot from being in that environment. And without further ado,
Craig Goossen.
Craig Goossen.
Quite the introduction. I like that.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, I was smiling because you have things flash, and you weren't joking. And there was I can reflect on it now, but yeah, there was a lot of people that came in and out of our home and our lives, and you were, since I've known you since probably 1975, we're both 50 years old. So we've probably known each other since 5 or 6 years old.
You're 50?
Not all. Yeah. 50.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why do you say that to him and not to me? As if he would not look like he's 50, but I certainly would look like I'm 50.
You look 50. Look at him. He's got like thick skin. It's nice and shiny.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I lived a lot harder too.
Sorry, man.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
do you have kids, Craig?
I do. I have 2, 14 and 12.
And they didn't age you. Wow.
Nice.
Well, I'm thank you. But I think a lot of it is genes, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit today since you brought my dad. And I'm not a stressed out person in general. And I think that might help. I'm like a tea kettle. If I feel the energy welling up, I let it blow.
I was going to say, you're not a stressed out person, but can I just talk about the last interaction we had on the telephone?
Sure.
So I'm on the phone with you.
Maybe.
I'm on the phone with you. Okay.
Yeah.
And
was this when you were interviewing him to join the?
This was we didn't even talk for this interview. I sent him a few text messages, and he said, "It's you. I'll do it." But before that, you were on the phone. I call you on the phone. You're driving. Hey, we're talking. Next thing I know, you're like, "Motherfucker, what the fuck are you doing? Get off the fucking phone. You don't know what the fuck you're doing." And I'm just sitting there like on the other phone. So he does that whole thing. He's like, "Hey, dude, I'm back again. I'm back again." Yeah. Just like that. Just like that, like with the most effortless, like this transition of like, let me just tame this thing, and then let me come back to you, just be fully present all over again, as if nothing happened.
It's true. Andy, contrary to popular belief, I'm really on a peaceful journey. And from time to time, you encounter people when you're driving who just do not give a shit.
Yeah.
And they're on the phone, and you're just a pawn in their game. And I'm just part of the resistance.
I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Let's get this clear.
Yeah.
As far as I was concerned, I'm always thinking like, I live in a state where they have gun carrying laws, which I'm thinking, one of these people is going to be just a loose cannon. And then, that's what I'm always thinking.
Yeah. Well, you know what? My wife and kids would probably cringe because they know that to be the truth. And it's not just necessarily in the car. It could be walking.
Yeah.
Anywhere. If I see some sort of something that I look at, I'm like, that you are being a complete asshole with no regard for anyone other than yourself. It immediately stops everything I'm doing. And I feel like I have to address that. And that probably is a bit dangerous, but I'm here.
It sounds like we should call the show Living Without Filters.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But you got to realize, you think this has anything to do with you. And I think I've told you a few times now, I don't believe that you're maybe even half aware of how much the Dutch culture has bled into all of the Goossen line in America.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. You've said it to me before, and I think, but I'm reflecting as I'm talking about, reacting in that sort of way. And it's no different than what I would have seen my dad do or any of my uncles do. They were just almost self-policing their environment, and if someone was doing something unjust or someone was doing something that really irritated them and was infringing upon any of their energy, it probably was going to get addressed. Yeah. Right then and there. So
I mean, there's no there's no family that I've ever interacted with that had that as a constant through it all. Like when I used to go to you know, is it PJ's dad was Joe? Is that who's PJ's dad? I forget. Pat. When I'd go there,
PJ's dad, yeah.
When I go to there and I can be at Pat's house, I remember like he had Star Wars on the 3-color projector before anyone had 3-color projectors and all that stuff. And like he would be just so strong. You know, you'd almost be like, you know, if he's had something to say, you'd be very cautious. Like, I'm not messing. I'm not poking the bear.
Well, my dad, my Uncle Joe, any of my uncles, my Uncle Greg, all very smart, bright people, very kind people, very faith-driven people. But if pushed, they would shove for sure. They would not back down from anything. And more important, like I tell my kids now more than ever, just recognition. When you walk past someone, look them in the eye. Really don't be the type of person that has your head down and looks away or is afraid to make any sort of social contact. Like, I'm inviting a social contact, you know, like I'm inviting of some sort of recognition when I look at somebody in their eyes. And if they look away, they look away. That's fine. And if it's just a nod and a wink, that's fine too. But I just think it is innately within me just to be like scanning the terrain and making some eye contact with folks and being friendly. And if that turned weird, it turns weird. If it turns friendly, great. That's the intention. And I definitely think that's how my family has always operated. You know, and boxing is that type of environment because I see the boxing background there, which is cool because I've been missing sports in general, but boxing really, especially. I'm a huge enthusiast to this day. But in the sport of boxing, you can't really be too passive. You know, it's you're dealing with people. It's very direct sport, very direct business, and it's being passive just it doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work, and people can kind of smell it on you if you're not really direct in there. So I was telling my kids a story the other day, or someone brought up Sacramento of all places, and I just like thought about Sacramento for a second. I remember the first time I was there, I was with my dad. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. It was like some back tunnel of some arena before a fight. And I just remember thinking how bizarre, how unfamiliar, how cool, and how intense like that interaction he had with somebody. And it looked like someone did not come from any environment I'd been around, you know, much. But how they had the mutual respect. There was a definite intensity. And it just always left a mark on me, and it makes you, I think, walk a bit unafraid, but your eyes are always open and your head's always on a swivel, and you're always expecting what can transpire here. So you're never too loosey goosey. You're definitely always when you walk out the door. I think in our family, the game's on a little bit, and you're definitely, I'm walking into the environment, and I'm gonna be part of the action, not a bystander. So it served all of us pretty well, I think.
I think there's something like when I don't know if it was like because I was read a bit about your dad, of course, before we came on. You know, one of the, obviously you'll remember it, but like the night that I took Ronnie to the boxing match in Dusseldorf that I asked Klitschko Chambers boxing. It was a heavyweight bout. Yeah. And I remember like before I went, I said, Ronnie, like I didn't know how to prepare her for it. Like, I'm like, baby, this is going to be something like unlike anything you're. And I think when you say that to someone, they automatically think you're exaggerating, right? Like they think, you know, there's not, Andy, I know. I said, babe, and when we go there, you're probably going to also see why when you ask me if I want to live in America, I don't get all that excited about it.
Well,
it's almost. I was gonna say, because it goes to such a like an intensity level, like that night. If I think of all of the nights in my life that I will reflect and say, wow, there's a memory, like the intensity of that night doesn't go away. Like we got, just for the reference, Bambos, we got utterly drunk the night like before the fight, and then and literally his dad, who's at that time, I don't know how old your dad was.
Probably somewhere between 55 and 60.
So imagine a 60-year-old, like as if he was 20 years old, windows rolled down, screaming out of the windows as if we were like having like just that level of celebration. There was that level, like
just hearing that. I think I like have Iggy Pop "Lust for Life" playing in my head, and that's kind of the energy I think my dad took on. That trip in particular was a really special one, and our relationship is such that you could call me at any point in time, and it's just I could not talk to you for a year, which is rare. But if I didn't talk to you for a year, we would talk, and boom, things are starting to happen. And I remember booking my flight to Dusseldorf for the fight, which is kind of an odd place, an odd destination. It's not like, oh, I'm going to Dusseldorf, but we were. and I think I reached out to you or vice versa. I don't know how that materialized, but it's just like within seconds, like, hey, can we coordinate? Can you get there? And, you're like, yeah, I'll see you there. So we got you to the fights. I think we had 2 tickets for you. And the most important thing is the night before going out, because it is a memorable night, and I'll never forget it. And it's not because it was anything so outrageous. It was just so much fun. It was such a free flowing, fun time. And then we had a mixed bag of people at the table, if you remember.
Totally. You mean the mixed bag? You guys have an entourage with each one. We talked about them a week ago. We talked about the photographer that was there.
Jan Sanders,
yeah, Jan Sanders. Ronnie. We're not going to talk about it on air, but Ronnie was like, "Oh, that Jan Sanders guy." Yeah, I remember some stuff he said that night. Like that's how much
it's took some good pictures. And we have those memories, And, and it's funny in life. You think about how things come together, and that night came together in a unique way. But it's kind of funny to think, because I haven't thought about Jan in a long time. I used to irritate the shit out of him, but it was always nice to look back after an event or after a road trip, usually, and there's like a roll of pictures, and it's been nice as I get older to occasionally stumble on a few of those pictures and reminisce, which I don't look back too often. And when I do, it's pretty rather infrequent I look back, but when I do look back, and I have some hard evidence of those times, those pictures that came out that day are just priceless.
Yeah.
There's a good picture of
like a reunion.
last night.
Yeah, that was the first time Craig admitted, Ronnie.
It was a party, is what it was.
Party.
It was just like the way I would expect any gathering to be, where you see how things are depicted.
No, don't do that. No.
For me,
your dad.
For me,
when your dad was present, I can only tell you there's certain people that create an energy around them you slipstream into it. So I would not have drunk half of what I drunk unless your dad wasn't sort of like kind of building up Andy, you got another one, like it was like there was a joy in it that wasn't no pressure. It was basically just tonight we're celebrating. And
it was a full-on celebration.
Yeah.
And but you're right. My dad was definitely a master of ceremonies in every way. From when I was growing up, it was always fun. I don't remember ever being in the household that was quiet.
No.
There was always energy. There was always music. There was always action. There was always people coming and going. I don't remember. To this day, I sometimes when it's peaceful and quiet, I'm like, it's still a little bit odd to me. Like I'm not very familiar with that sort of quality in life. I love it when it happens, but I do like a bit of a chaotic environment. And my dad was good at making sure he liked having people around. He liked being not only an entertainer, but really a host. I think he was one of the best.
That's what I always felt with him
all time.
I always felt that with him. Like whenever you'd meet him, he'd always be there's an energy I'm very familiar with when you get pulled into it. It's like they want to make sure that you have a good time. And I always felt that whenever I had any contact with him.
Yeah.
Sometimes I miss the intimacy with him, though, I have to say. Because when I was with him the last time when we were in Dusseldorf, like I had to pull him like 3 times. And I said to him, like, I told him how much respect and appreciation I had for you and how much that was for me a reflection of how he raised you. And like, I said it to him and he brushed it off. And I'm like, no, Dan, come back and look at me. Like, I'm telling you now, Like, there's very few people I respect this much in my life, and I just want you to see and hear it. And like, I had to say it 3 fucking times, and before he kind of like would allow a little bit of it in, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, and that might have to do with although a showman for sure. Maybe and a guy who's generally in the spotlight. Maybe he felt a tad bit uncomfortable with accolades, and that happens, and
sure.
but you're a very direct person too, so you got to remember it, Andy, not to turn the tables on your interview.
Everyone does.
But you also are not an alarming person, but you have a different stance that I think puts people on, like it's a different take. But he had known you since you were a kid, and you known him, a long time. So it's a different different approach there. But anyways, that time was so amazing. I think about it a lot because I do reflect on, now that I have nothing to really do with boxing anymore other than being an enthusiast. I still go to, when things were a bit more open and normal in our society, I was still going to a lot of boxing matches, and I would take people from work and we'd still go to the events. And I still there's something about a boxing match. And I've heard people say, oh, that's savage, it's this, it's that. I think once you finally get people there, that all goes out the window, and they just look at the pageantry of it all. And there's something just really amazing about two highly skilled, conditioned athletes with nobody else in the ring with them, going to combat with such great skill. And it's something that's very intense. It encapsulates kind of everything I love about life. There's an intensity, there's a moment of truth. There's a storyline that can develop throughout the course of the fight. There's an energy coming from the others surrounding in the arena. There's music intermittently through there. It's just the sensory to an event like that. Just really pumped my blood, and to be able to be fortunate enough to work with my family for a period of time at least, and to grow up watching a lot of events throughout the course of my life and taking some small part of it, it develops who you are as a human being. And I wouldn't be who I am without those experiences, just like none of us. It's just my experiences happen to be pretty intense and a lot of fun and kind of an adventure.
Yeah,
so, right.
We get some echo sometimes. I don't know if it's on our end or the. I've got a question. Like when I kind of have that backstory that's always sounds like it's almost mythical. Like your grandpa basically had all the kids, and then he'd sort of put boxing gloves on them and let them box the shit out of each other. Is that a fair story, or how did?
Well, I wasn't there, but as it was relayed to me, I would liken it more to maybe the way you learned how to throw a baseball, the way you learned how to throw a football.
Yeah,
you learned how to throw a punch. And I think my grandfather, being an athletic person, made sure that all of his kids and his grandkids had a wide range of athleticism. And from what was relayed to me was, there's 7 brothers and 2 sisters in my dad's family. And the boys would probably be parceled off into the living room and a makeshift ring, which probably had a couch here and some sort of, furniture barricades. And they'd probably box. And I don't think they were necessarily beating the shit out of each other, but when a fight's a fight, so I'm sure there's some tense moments throughout there. So, but it wasn't anything that was ever glorified in our family as far as talking about, and that sort of, to me, the sport of boxing, which might have been odd to others, wasn't odd to me because the exposure I had to it. So I never thought of it as savage or family fighting each other, things like that. It was what it was.
But if they're having, like that's how they were basically raised, right? At least that this was considered normalcy. This is kind of what we do, and this is sport. Familiarizing you with any other sport. But now, when does it transition from that into actually becoming tengoose?
Well, that's a fun thing because my recollection of it as a little kid, probably about 12 years old, 1982-ish. I do remember going to fights as a young person, going to the Olympic Auditorium. My dad would take me there. I remember I grew up, I think you might remember Randy Shields,
Of course.
who was a welterweight contender in the 70s. He'd fought Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard and Wilfred Benitez, all the greats, all the greats. He was like my babysitter. He was like the guy that have to watch us if my dad was out of town, my mom had to go work at school or something like that. He's the guy that watched us, and he's like the number one contender in the world fighting on TV. That's my babysitter for my brother and I. Taught me how to drive, the whole thing. Probably taught me how to drive at 13 years old. Like, come on, get in there, use the stick shift and things like that. We're going to the movie. So we were around boxing a lot. My family was around boxing. My Uncle Joe was great friends of Randy and worked his corner. My Uncle Pat had fought professionally. So it'd been in the family, quite a bit. And my Uncle Greg, who lived over off of Laurel Canyon, Riverside, not far from where you and I grew up.
My dad used to go over to his place all the time. He was across from his office. Yeah. Right.
So my Uncle Greg had this yard that my uncles had turned into like a baseball field, like a wiffle ball field with a mound, home plate, a fence that they built around there. And we would have these barbecues, these family barbecues, 30 people out there, bigger family is, and have wiffle ball games, baseball games. And as the legend goes, I think my dad and his brothers were sitting around saying, why don't we build a boxing ring here and start training fighters? And it's just, as anything happens in life, just smart, creative, interesting people start talking about it, and then they put it to action, more importantly. So they put it to action. They built a ring. I remember the heavy bag hanging from the tree. It was all outside. It wasn't inside. I think my Uncle Joe would have to take one of the leaf blowers and get them off to the tree to get the branches. The leaves would fall on the ring mat, and he'd have to do that every day. So it's just the genesis of creativity of like, let's just keep doing this. How far can we do this? How far can we keep taking things? And that's, to me, a great time. I'm smiling because I think about those times. I remember those days and how great it was, how fun it was. Now you and I are in school. We're probably 7th, 8th grade, and things are starting to kind of happen a little bit. And it's fun to look back on that a little bit and think of the trajectory and where it all went. What a tough sport and tough business.
If you think about it as well, I mean, like that's sort of like, and I always get stuck with people today who kind of think that they can outthink the next step instead of just doing stuff and figuring out how. I mean, the fact that you're the 51st episode of this wonderful chaos. I mean, basically, we just started doing it because COVID said, "What can we do to occupy our time?" Yeah. And the first episodes, I mean, they were messy. Like, to say they were bad. Like we had iPad, we shoved an iPad in a football helmet, and we just had that was the person we were interviewing. It was just, and it was we did it because we loved doing it, not because we were trying to achieve anything per se. Yeah. And I see that, like, once it becomes like, oh, I'm doing this to get somewhere, it loses like all that authenticity that makes it work. Yeah.
When I woke up this morning, I read something in the New York Times interview with Bob Dylan, and not that he touches on that specifically, but you really get a sense of this is a person that is pretty much just saying ideas and energy just comes magically from other places, and so you just will tap into it. And one of the biggest things that I guess a pet peeve, something that drives me crazy, is smart people kind of annoy me. People that are like too smart, they're always thinking about it. They're always working on it and doing it and not doing anything about it. They're just thinking about it and organizing it and formatting it and making
perfectionism.
Just makes it fit into this tiny little box. To me, fuck the box. Just fucking do it, because that genesis of an idea could wind up being something completely different, and it's amazing. But if you just limit yourself to trying to make it work before you launch it, I don't even know what that means. I wouldn't even know how to operate in that sort of environment. Don't talk about it, be about it. That's what my friend James Toney used to always say, the great fighter, James Toney. Don't talk about it, be about it.
I always see the pictures of him with a cigar in his hand.
Yeah, he couldn't
Yeah.
stop. So that probably was, probably not the best training methods, but one of the great fighters of all time. But he just always would say that. Hear him in the gym. Don't talk about it. Be about it.
Yeah.
And
And that's
it meant a lot to
basically,
me.
I've seen, and I, in a way, I'm always telling Bambos when we're talking about like our backgrounds, and I'm like, half of what I notice is that if you're in an environment of like entrepreneurialism, then it bleeds into your DNA, and you start to see that's how it works. Like, oh, if you just go out and do it like that, it tends to work, and then you kind of learn through a lot of osmosis. You're not even aware that you've learned it. But that's at least what I've seen.
You guys deal with a lot of people, and you probably see a common thread of people that are very concerned to make mistakes. And to me, it's boy, those are chains I don't ever want. I mean, if I was worried about the mistakes I would make all the time, I don't think I'd do anything. I don't know if I'd leave the house. But you're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw something up so that you can fine tune it and make it better. I mean, that's all part of that process. So it's always fascinating to me that people are so concerned about whenever they start something, it has to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. It probably drove you both crazy when you watched transcripts or you watched the video of yourselves the first couple episodes. You probably went, "Oh,
never watched an episode.
Why am I doing that?" You critique yourself, and that's a great process, I think, because I think out of studying and examining your mistakes, you start to make things better, and that's what life is about.
Did you ever critique yourself?
No,
me neither.
I actually watch the first like 2 minutes of each episode because it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Like, because at least like how we enter is like so much who we are. It's like, oh, I love that. I love being so me, that's the feeling.
Maybe you started and you just went, kind of nailed it there. You moved on. Is that what it was? That's good. You guys.
I think the fact that we never nail it is exactly what makes us like we can't time the intro. A Wonderful Chaos. Like I think in 51 times we've done it once. Like in the one time we were like looked in awe, like wow, we actually got it right.
Well, maybe
and then we did unmute.
Yeah, maybe you didn't examine those first episodes. I think you probably nailed it with the title of your show, A Wonderful Chaos. You kind of just set the tone right there and just said, this is chaotic and it's great.
No, I was going to say that's what we didn't come up with a name, just like you were talking about. So we did it and we didn't have a name. We had the worst platform that never worked. So that we like every time like we got through half of a thing and it dropped out. And then what ended up happening is some woman just came on. She says, wow, this is a wonderful chaos. And I looked at Bambos and said,
that's the name.
That's the name. We got it. That's it.
Bob would say that's nothing you generated. Just it came down. You were just a vessel for it. Yeah.
Natalie. Yeah.
Great.
I'm really intrigued with the fact that you were raised in a boxing background, right?
Yeah.
And in Amsterdam, a lot of the communities that I see are very spiritual, and they're raising their children, and they try to bring in a certain aspect of, I want my child to be present and all this stuff. But talking with you, like I didn't feel an inch of like, a cramp in my body when I'm talking with people. Normally I can feel if they're congruent, and I didn't feel that with you. So being with you, I felt, wow, you came out of that world, which can be perceived as being very savage, but in fact, it was one of the best upbringings ever. Like I don't even hear you having daddy or mommy issues.
No,
his mom hated everybody.
No, she just hated you, Andy.
I know. She's like I don't know what it is. And maybe like I always said, like whenever I came over, just like she never felt like, I always tell you this, never felt like she ever liked me. That's all I know.
Tell that Jewish boy never to come back here again.
Yeah, my mom, she's just a tough person, and if she didn't like you, you wouldn't have been around. I could tell you.
I know that's what you've already told me. Yeah, exactly.
She just shows it differently.
Yeah,
I think she had to be tough if she was married to your dad, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a woman like I can imagine. Tough. Jesus.
Yeah, she was tough. Yeah. She still is tough. She's 70 years old. She's still tough. Definitely a point of view. Definitely loving. Nobody's fool. She could look in someone's eyes and detect whatever she needed to detect pretty quickly, and I don't think that's changed at all. And she's worked at the high school that we went to for, I guess, 30, 40 years now. I don't know how long she's been. It's been a long time. So I think being around young people probably keeps you sharp too, because you see all those little teenage nuances that keep it kind of fresh for you. So yeah, she's still a vibrant force of nature, Andy, and and probably would give you a hard time at least for a couple
I hope
seconds.
so.
We should have her
We
on the
should have
show.
her on. What didn't you like about me when I was a kid?
If you could get her on, that would be your best job ever, because I don't think you could get her on here, but if you could,
Let's try.
Yeah, well, you can send
that's
an
a challenge
invite.
to both of you.
Hey,
It's a challenge to both of you.
I'd like to go segue to something a little bit more serious.
Okay.
So, your dad, right?
Yeah.
Your dad. You can get out the tissue. Like,
Okay.
from the moment when, like, at some point, it happened quick, I know that, but at some point he's diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when he comes home and has that, you're not living at the house at that time. Like,
No.
how did you see him move through that, like, that time in his life?
Well, I wasn't living in Los Angeles at the time, and I got a phone call from Debbie, his wife, and she said, "Hey, your dad's not feeling good, and he's probably gonna have some surgery done." And then I talked to him, and he was always vague about, he's he's a pretty vague guy. Yeah, so my family and I, we drove out there to Los Angeles the next day, and yeah, he was diagnosed with cancer, and he never really left the hospital after that surgery.
Wow.
But
he didn't say, when you got that call, it wasn't like, oh, I have cancer. He says, I'm having a surgery.
To my recollection, it may have been relayed to me that they found something.
Found something, yeah.
And they're going to take it out.
Okay.
And so I was pretty optimistic going into, well, not optimistic, but I was hopeful that a procedure that was going to be performed would have a positive result.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly, if I remember, when the doctor came out, I kind of knew it was going to be a real problem.
Wow.
It was way more. It was way more problematic than I had maybe imagined or hoped. And maybe it's because I didn't know a lot. My dad didn't talk about it a lot, and I didn't know a lot, and I wasn't around. I wasn't working in the office with him at that point in time. I had moved to Arizona and been there for a few years. So I didn't see it day to day. But it all happened pretty quickly. And yeah, it's taught me a lot about life right then and there. I'll tell you what, you always have these episodes in life that spin you around, and out of it,
I mean, because that was really quick then. Because if you say basically you get a call, you go there the next day, he has the surgery, and then
I think it was 30 days.
30 days from the point when you knew about it to the end.
Yeah.
And those 30 days, did you have time to be with him, or was he conscious? Like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, very. Yeah, very much so. He looked great up until the end. I mean, wow. Yeah, I mean, he looked great. It was and it had very direct conversations,
really?
Very open conversations. Not a lot of words, but just a lot of.
Because he's always bigger than life. So I'm actually curious, at that moment when he's now kind of, obviously he's in touch with his mortality. Like, I'm curious, was there like a fundamental shift in how he was to the world, or what did you feel like, no, this is who he was all the way to the end?
No, very strong, very calm. Just strength. The adjectives that would come up would be strength and love.
Wow.
Very loving and deeply faithful man. A Catholic beginning to the end. And I do think he, which I reflect on also, because I heard your comment about Catholicism earlier. And I think if you're religious in any way, if you're of any faith, it's a roller coaster ride. It's not just like, well, here I'm Catholic and this is how life is. It's not like that. There's challenges. It's supposed to be challenging, and it's supposed to be questioned, and it's supposed to, have twists and turns. And I think what I reflect on in that regard is I know he was able to gather a lot of strength of the unknown because of his faith.
Mm.
And he expressed that and found a lot of solace in it. And I didn't see fear from him at any point in time, because I think about it like, will I be fearful in that moment? Will I be fearful when I'm faced with the end? And I believe, because I was there for a good period of that time in those 30 days, that he was at peace, and he was making peace with people, and was very, very calculated about making sure that he could touch everyone that he loved in his life, and reflected that, really. I think he didn't look at it, I don't think, completely as the end. At least that's not my perception of it. I think it looked at as like he truly, as a Catholic, was like, I will live on. I will. And I think he probably gathered a lot of strength in that. I know he did. And he was a strong person anyways. There is a comfort I have knowing that I saw in his eyes no fear, even though it was very unknown to him what was going to happen. But there was definitely a clarity, definitely a clarity to it. And you and I have known each other a long time. We know each other's secrets. And going through your mother's death, in the uncertainty of not having those moments in there, which I did, it's really interesting to me that for all of us, there will be these moments. It'll come. This will come to an end for all of us at some point in time, and it's incredibly fascinating. How is it going to manifest itself? Where will I be? How old will I be? Who will be around? It's just I try not to think about those things too much, because they're a bit painful, and I prefer to look at the birds and the trees and hear the music, rather than what will happen when I die. But having a glimpse into people you love, moments like that, it's really intense, and I've never been the same since. That's for sure.
So did you guys, between you and your father, did you get to exchange something or share something between you that was not said beforehand? Like you might always say, I know he loves me, but did you guys take the time to express that?
Yeah, I mean, my dad and I always knew he loved me. That was never a question. Never. And not that it was like, I love you all the time and things like that. But I knew. I was telling my son the other day, or my daughter, I think, maybe it's my wife, that in the times I was probably most afraid of telling my dad something was probably the times he was the most loving. If I had to come into him and say, here's what I'm going to do, or here's what happened, those are the times his reaction was never like, what do you mean? I can't believe you, dummy. What would you do? It was always like really calm, really supportive, and really loving. And my dad was a pretty hard, intense guy, but in the moment of truth, he was actually like what you'd hope someone would be, which is a weird, conflict in the human character, But we didn't have to talk about things that weren't said before, because I'm a very open person and I speak my mind, and I don't have that ability to hold things in really well. I just say it. You're sitting next to a guy that's like that too. And my dad was the same way. He didn't hold it in. If he had something to say, he would just say it. And if it hurt your feelings, it's going to hurt your feelings a little bit, but it needed to be said. So when we did speak, which we did a lot, it was more about very personal, positive things that really, here's nothing that was left out. There was nothing that had to be tied together with me, at least. And I think a lot of that had to do with, for 10 years, I worked very closely with him. I left a job in Los Angeles and went to go work with him in Las Vegas with my Uncle Tom and my Uncle Joe. And at that time, Uncle Larry. There's a lot of Goossens working for the company at the time. And when I went to go work for him, we probably didn't. Our relationship was probably not its best. I was probably 32 years old and been doing my own thing, and probably not kept in great communication. He was living in Las Vegas, so I didn't see him as much. When I started working for him, I think we really, even though it could be contentious sometimes, as a working relationship is, particularly with your family, I think anything that we had between us, it was always worked out. So I didn't have like a closure scenario that I needed to tie up with him, and nor would he with me. It was just more like two guys talking about real shit in a very compact way, because there wasn't a lot of time. So it's
now come forward a bit. Now you're like I mentioned earlier, this weekend he was supposed to be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I think that was happening in New York.
Yeah, I would be there right now.
And how does one get inducted? Is it like a voting, or is there a group of people? Like, who are the people that would actually decide that?
Well, these are secret panels, for these award things. So there's a consortium of people who, writers, people that are ingrained into the fabric of the sport in a variety of ways that vote. And it's not easy. There's a lot of people that have put their life's work into the sport of boxing, which is definitely a labor of love. It seems glamorous, but I think if you looked at 100 people in the sport of boxing, maybe one or two of them's like truly financially successful.
Yeah.
So it's just a real tough road. So these people make an evaluation. There's a boxer component. People are combatants in the sport, and then people who are managers and promoters. And my dad was it was his first time on the ballot, and probably was I concerned that he would make it or not? Yeah, I was. I was concerned that he would get on in the first ballot, but he did. He made it through there, which is great. And I know there's a lot of people that he had touched. He was always good to everybody. I think if he had a problem with somebody, he addressed it. And so I think he was in good standing with the sport in general. And I really hadn't thought about this weekend until now. I know when you asked me to do this, I thought about, that's the weekend I'd be gone, but now I won't be gone. And I'm just thinking about it now, and it's kind of, I'm sure I'll reflect on it more over the weekend. But yeah,
I think
it's tough.
The one thing that I saw that always baffled me is that, like, when you look at it from the outside on a TV screen, like it's so finished in the end that you don't see this raw, it's so ramshackled for me on the back end that to see it on the front end, or everyone would, like, I go to Dusseldorf, he's with 5 guys, we're hanging out, sitting in a room, in a hotel room, like there's like 5 people from your side, there's obviously a massive structure that's organizing the actual venue, and then but in the end, like, it was like you'd think that there's hundreds of people that are like going into managing, and there's kind of, you fly to a venue with 5 other people, as far as I experienced it. And then on TV, you might have millions and millions of people watching this thing where there's 5 people that were in a back room on one side just saying, how are we going to manage this? And who we're going to, like, it's phenomenal, because no one would think that there was that little, like, kind of finessing behind the scenes.
Well, there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of people that work hard to make it look effortless. But it's punk rock, man. It is so punk rock. It is, it's not a structured thing like that. I mean, television's one thing. You have a television entity that definitely manages that piece, but you're dealing with, in boxing, it's not the NBA, it's not the NFL, it's not Major League Baseball, it's not professional soccer. It's this whole other culture. It is punk fucking rock, man. That's all I can tell you, is you have to be ready for anything, flexible. It's craziness. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun being involved in it in my little way. I can tell you that, because to me it was fun to land anywhere it was, Not every place was as nice as Dusseldorf. You could be in a very small town in the middle of nowhere, and it's just as vibrant.
Reseda.
Yeah, Reseda, where we grew up, around there. But to me, it was just it's like bringing the circus to town a little bit.
Yeah.
It starts slow and starts to build. I remember, and you'll like this. I remember one time we were doing, for a while there, we had hooked up with some people from BET through Showtime, and we started doing shows in the Caribbean. And we did a show in St. Lucia, which is this really remote, beautiful place. And my task is to make sure that the show happens, on that scheduled time. So Saturday at 5 o'clock, you're on air. There needs to be a ring and stands and everything. And I remember I kept going out to the field where they were supposed to be building the structure. It's like a polo field. And every day I'd go out there to see the progress, and there was like never progress. It was like such incremental, small progress. And finally, I show up like Thursday, fights on Saturday, and there's guys just sitting around. They might be smoking some weed or something like that, and just really lax. It's hot and humid out there, and everyone's kind of just taking a break. I'm like, what the fuck? What are you doing? Like this needs to get built like now. Like, let's build it now. They're like, stop. You're not in the United States. This will be ready at 5 o'clock on Saturday, but it won't be ready until then. Like and that was like hard for me to go, wait, what? I want this like to go, I want to go and it's done. And then it's living there and I can start working around it. They're like, no, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to get done, but you need to chill out because you're not in charge here. And I was like, it was a great lesson because I was like, this is not going to work. This is going to get fucked up. And I remember showing up 3 o'clock on Saturday, 2 hours before the show probably. And I see the people lining up in the street, the fans of the country coming into the arena, getting ready. And when I walked in there, it looked like that shit had been there for months, ready for us. I mean, it was just stunning.
Yeah.
Like, and it teaches you got to have faith in people.
What was the worst thing that happened? That one worked out, but there must have been things that were just horrible, that just were just like, oh, that's bad.
Oh, they're too countless to name.
Really?
Yeah. Probably the worst. The worst was a foreign country, to be left nameless, where I showed up with my dad and maybe 2 others. And as we landed in Russia to get to this country, things started falling apart to our destination. And I'm getting a phone call like, what's going on? What? Just wait. I'll be there in 4 hours. Okay. Just relax. Everything's fine. I don't know what's going on there. I have no understanding what they're talking about. Really, it just sounds terrible. The accommodations, everything. So now we land there, and I'll never forget, my dad and I are getting off this plane. It's not like an airport. It was kind of like a field with a hut. And we're getting off the plane and we're walking towards the hut, which I guess is where we need to go to get transportation to our destination, which is about an hour away. And the fighter that was fighting the other fighter was walking the other way, like I'm not staying here. I'm out of here, man. I'm getting on that plane and going home. Like, you can't do that. So that was probably the worst one, because from that point on, for the next 2 weeks, we were in that country, which felt like we were captives, and I don't remember if we were even allowed to go to the fight. It was just, I remember it was an awful experience. It probably was one of the last fights I did before I said, maybe I shouldn't be away from my little kids so much, and maybe I should stay home a little bit more, and maybe I should probably make some changes in my life. And that was probably it. And, yeah, but there's a lot of those stories, man.
The issue I've always had with boxing that frustrated me through the years was the actual scoring. Is that,
you and everyone else. Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that there's no sport that I know of other than boxing, which feels like it's so arbitrary.
Well, there's no sport like boxing, one. So you can't really compare it to anything else, even other combat sports. It's just not like them. you have an even number of rounds. And I remember boxing used to be, you know, the modern era was 15 rounds. So it was a, you know, an odd number of rounds. So maybe you didn't have so many ties, you know, draws and whatnot. I just think a lot has changed in the sport, and it is arbitrary because it's just like life. You have three people sitting around a ring, and you might see something a little bit differently than I did. You're sitting across from me, Andy, and you're on the other side. All three of us could be judging a fight, and although there's a criteria we're supposed to adhere to, we might have a different viewpoint from it, from our chair, and that does come into play. I mean, to me, when I'm watching a fight, it's not lost on me that's probably not easy to judge. That a lot can come into play there, and I try not to get too incensed when a judgment is read and it's like completely opposite of what I saw. Now, there are times when a fight, the judgment comes and it's so off base that I don't know in what instance you could score that for another fighter, because this person clearly won. I don't know how that happens. I don't know if it's incompetence. I don't know if I'm just wrong and didn't see it and I didn't pay close enough attention, if I didn't see the nuances within there. You know, I don't know. It's just, it's an imperfect sport, and that's kind of what makes it awesome too.
Yeah, I want to know, like, what is the best moment that you had in the sport in your life? Like, what was like the one you're like, yeah, I'll remember that the rest of my life?
A lot.
I remember seeing a picture of you jumping, and you know I love that picture. It's like you jumping into the None Has Won. I don't know if it was a championship.
Well, I wasn't in that one, but my family, the Michael Nunn era was some of the best times of my life as far as family boxing success, because there was such a mojo building with this guy, and it was a guy that no one believed in, and it was just my dad and my uncle Joe, who trained him, who did an amazing job. I mean, if you asked Uncle Joe, who you should have on the show one day, he would tell you when that fighter was right, like mentally right, he was unbeatable. So there's a lot of big fights he had, like when he won the title versus Frank Tate, and when he knocked out Sambu Kalambe, and I think it was 16 seconds, something like the first punch of the fight, he knocked him out. And the next day we were at the Arsenio Hall show, which was the biggest show at the time. And I just remember going, this is just rock and roll, man. This is awesome. But it came to a screeching halt because, if you recall, in our life, he then left my family promotional company, my dad, and went to another promoter, and things started to fall apart from there. And that happened a lot, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I saw a lot of, which was that boxing is sort of this, I'm with you until it gets really good, and then someone comes and offer me a bigger payday. So that was something I saw a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, remember, it's very kind of a desperate sport, really, you know, as far as everyone involved in it, and things don't come easily. And people may have to make some personal judgment calls that's against their moral character or within their moral character, worse, that might have collateral damage, because it just seems like that's what they have to do to get from point A to point B, and that happens a lot. It's between all the things I saw that were great, like I can name off 100 things that were just pure joy and elation and a celebratory 24 hours that ensued shortly thereafter. And then the devastating moments that had a definitely more seismic effect over the course of months and years. They're endless stories. But what it really has taught me in my life is that you have to manage the highs like you manage the lows. You know, so you can never be too comfortable with yourself, you know, because there's something lurking around the corner that you need to be prepared for always. And I think it's a great lesson in life. I don't find it, you know, macabre in any way, really. I find it to be very centered, of just like, oh, this is good. Things are happening really good. Well, let's just keep the moment here, you know, really savor it, because tomorrow something can happen that could spin it off its axis. And it's been a great lesson throughout the course of these years, particularly now at my age, where you take the good with the bad and you hope for more good than bad. And it's a pretty centered way for me to at least experience life. And it solely comes from boxing, because I don't think I could have learned it any other way so dramatically. Because I remember it was probably James Toney fighting in Madison Square Garden. My wife's pregnant with our first kid, and we're in New York City, and he wins the heavyweight championship of the world. I just remember being on such a high. And from the time we left New York the next day to the time we landed in Los Angeles, we had found out that he had been stripped of the title because he tested positive for steroids. So that plane ride, which was like high intensity celebration, to landing and getting a phone call and being like that in 5 hours, just all ended.
Wow.
That's a good punch in the gut, that you go, okay, so you always keep kind of even keeled, because shit happens, man. So there was always constant reminders in that sport and in our lives in general, no matter what you do. You could work in a record store and you probably have the same sorts of experience.
But I've always found it more intense in
Oh,
your
yeah.
life. There's so much crazy that I've seen that kind of, just because the intensity of it all, I've found that. By the way, we're coming up on our hour. That was it, my friend.
Good. Well,
Thank
it's good
you.
to see your face, and it's good to meet you. And then hopefully you can start having some of your friends on this show.
I am Monday.
He's
Good.
got his friends on. His friends are all kind of like, they all wear like half t-shirts and things. They're all very into their masculinity, or femininity, I think would be a better way of saying it. No?
Sure.
No.
That's what he says. Sure.
Dutch men are they are who they are, and it is what it is.
No, we import them for the show usually.
See you later.
Thanks, guys.
Love
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Talk to you. Bye. Hey. Well, that was nice. Thank you for letting me go down memory lane.
Have you ever been punched in the face?
Never. I remember when I was a kid, like the only one that I used to like get in fights with was this guy in my 8th grade, because he was always sort of half bullying me. His name was Richard Hop. I remember. Craig,
Richard Hop, if you're out there.
I always felt like that. But I didn't know is that his dad once came and he like grabbed me by the shirt and said, don't do to my kid. And it was really funny because I was always feeling like the one that was being having to defend, but clearly he was going home uncomfortable and sharing it with his dad. So we both had the same experience of discomfort. Yeah, that's it. So that's Friday, Bambos.
It's Friday, so
we made it to another end of a week. Yeah. 51 sessions. Cool. So we see you next week.
Monday, 4 p.m.
4 p.m. on A Wonderful Chaos.
We did.